I'm getting a late start, and I have to make a hard stop at 10 o'clock because I have an appointment. But so I'll speak quickly, with your permission. I want to speak about the milchamos of Chanukah way back, Malchus Beis Hashmonaim, and maybe in previous years this would be like a bit of a halachic history lesson, but here we are in the middle of almost the same thing again. That we're fighting for our lives here as Jews in Eretz Yisrael, and really, as I keep on mentioning, there hasn't really been, before the modern state of Israel, there really hasn't been a war in our history with the nations around us, except for in the time of Tanakh. So from the time of the Bayis Sheni until now, this is our first, and our precedent would be the Chanukah story of the Hashmonaim. That would be the precedent for anything that we need to know about these halachas. So the Torah says in Parshas Vayechi, pasuk you're all familiar with, this is when Yaakov Avinu was blessing his children. And he said to them, very important lashon, by the way, and he called his children together and he says, Heyas vayikra Yaakov abana vayomer heyasvu va'agida lachem es asher yikra eschem ba'achris hayomim. Gather together because I want to talk to you, I want to tell you es asher yikra eschem ba'achris hayomim, that which will yikra eschem happen to you ba'achris hayomim. So it was Yaakov Avinu making a bracha, a prediction, a nevuah. We'll have to learn what this is, what kind of a din this has. Of Asher Yikra Eschem Ba'achris Hayamim. I've always made the diuk, and it's no important than right now, that Asher Yikra Eschem Ba'achris Hayamim, the Yikra is spelled wrong here. Because Yikra should be like Makara. Asher Yikra, what's happening? Kuf Reish Hey. And here it's spelled Asher Yikra Yud Kuf Reish Aleph. I see the Ebenezer, I think, makes some kind of a diktuk cheshbon, but the Pashat Pshat is, this is the same words as Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. Vayikra, so could be that the translation of this pasuk is not gather together my sons and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days, but rather gather together my sons and I will tell you what will be calling to you at the end of days. Asher Yikra Eschem, like a calling. So sometimes, like a person or a shevet or a Klal Yisrael in general has a kriya from Shemayim, and this is something you feel inside. It's not something that anybody is saying necessarily. I don't think. Maybe it's the kriya of Eliyahu Hanavi, but it's a kriya. It's not a just a prediction of the future. This is what's going to happen. Asher Yikra, but rather Asher Yikra Eschem Ba'achris Hayamim. And this is probably one of the most important diyukim that one can make in this pasuk, Asher Yikra with an aleph, Eschem Ba'achris Hayamim. What kind of a tyke of halacha does that have? So when he got to Shevet Yehuda, he said, Lo Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, that here's my bracha to you, Lo Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, that you will always hold the staff of leadership. That you will basically be the king. Gur Ar Yehuda Mitarav Bnei Elisa is a whole bracha about him being the king of Israel. And on this, the Ramban, let's just skip please to the second source that I printed for you because it's very important. Everybody quotes this Ramban, but it's very important to learn the Ramban inside. You see, it's a little bit different than the way everybody says it. Says the Ramban on this pasuk, Lefi dati, in my opinion, Hayu amlachim hamochim al Yisrael mishar hashvatim achrei David. So you had David Melech Yisrael, right? You had Shaul was the Melech, and then David was the Melech. And then after the time of Shlomo, there was Malchus Yisrael and Malchus Yehuda. Everything split up. So there were kings, and there were kings. There were kings that were from the Malchus Yehuda, which were a clear kiyum of this bracha, of this pasuk in the Torah, La Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda. And then there were kings that were kings. Well, that from Malchei Yisrael. Says the Ramban, Chiddush Nifla, that Lefi Dati, Hayu HaMlochim HaMolchim Al Yisrael, Mishar HaShvatim Achri David, Oivrim Al Das Aviyam Umavirim Nachla. They were going against Yaakov Avinu. Mapitom. Going against Yaakov Avinu. Avru Al Tzavos HaZakein. They went against the tzava. Now, a tzava, that's a last will and testimony. A tzava has a huge amount of tokef. A tzava, you have to listen to a tzava. That's a din bifnei atzma. Somebody leaves a tzava, whether it's because mitzvah lishmaya divrei ames, a tzava is big tokef in Torah. And Yaakov Avinu gave a tzava, says not a tzivui, but a tzava, a will, that this is the way it has to be. Yehuda has to be the Melech Yisrael. That's what he said. Tzavas hazakim v'nenshu b'hem, and everybody got an oynish. K'may Amar Hosea, the Navi said in Paraches, talking about the Malchei Yisrael, Heim himlichu v'loy mimeni, saying in the name of Hashem, Heim himlichu v'loy mimeni. I did not make those people kings of Israel. There was a Navi. Good. V'zeh comes to our case. It's good. You're saying good. V'zeh haya oynesh ha'Hashmonaim. And this was the problem and the punishment, as he says, of the Hashmonaim. Shemalchu b'bayisheni. They were kings in the time of the Bayisheni in direct opposition to what he calls the tzava of Yaakov Avinu. And the truth is, he says, Ki hayu chasidei elyon. They were tremendous tzaddikim. V'il malehem nishtachu atayr v'amitzvos miYisrael. We're going to give them tremendous amount of credit. By the way, in Alanissim it says Zaydim biyad oiskei sayrosecha. They were Rosh Yeshivas also. It wasn't just Kohanim. Zaydim biyad oiskei sayrosecha. V'afal pikein, and with all their greatness, nenshu gia ha'oinesh b'soif. When it went to Ad Kedei Kach, that the Gemara says in Bava Basra Gimel Amud Aleph, Komanda Omar mi Beis Hashmonaim Kasina Avdahu. That if anybody comes along and says, oh, what family are you? What's your name? So he says, I'm Hashmonaim. I'm from that family, Hashmonaim. No. Hashmonaim were all killed out. All killed out. These are the people that saved Klal Yisrael. Unless he's an Eved. Shenichrasu kulam ba'avain hazeh. Because they all were killed in this oven. Now the Ramban is saying a chiddush here, because it is true that Hurdos HaMelech, that's already at the Roman time, one of his first things that he did was he killed out Harag Talmidei Chacham. He killed a lot of people. Yeah, Harag Talmidei Chacham, but he was also Harag Kol Beis Hashmonai. He was threatened by the Beis Hashmonai because they were kings. And he said, I'm the king, the Romans are the kings, we're going to take over here. And he killed Kol Beis Hashmonai, and he was so successful at his killing that nobody was able to say that I'm from Beis Hashmonai. They were wiped out. Now the Ramban's chiddush is, we know that to be true historically, Ramban's chiddush is that was an oynesh for the story of Chanukah. It's a big chiddush.
Even though it was a good thing.
Even though it was a great thing. Even though without them, ishtachu Torah miYisrael. But they took a mantle of leadership that they weren't allowed to take because they were Kohanim.
So they should have passed it on to Beis David as soon as they went to war?
Something like that. If they should go to war at all. It's not their job. It's not so pashut. The Ramban is saying, and we'll learn a little further, that a group of Kohanim that were oisik in Yonei Kahuna should go out and even go to war, let alone create a government. And so the Ramban says they got an oynish for that. The Gemara doesn't say this as an oynish. I ought to repeat this. The Gemara doesn't say that they were killed out because of an oynish. And if they were killed out of an oynish, maybe it was because they all became tzedukim at the end. That would have been that's a more obvious oynish, that they all became tzedukim, so they got wiped out.
From the Lashon of the Rambam, he's saying it's like mamish punish kares in the sense of
Mamish what?
punish kares.
That's not what he means by kares. Shenichrasu kulam, they were all cut out, wiped out. It doesn't mean kares, but oven hazeh. Cut down, like a kares eitz. V'afal pi He says, and even though you can tell me what I just told him, the one branch of the family there all became Sadducees. Maybe it's from that. Hashmonaim means they didn't pass from leadership or pass from life. They didn't pass away. The whole reason was that they violated the tzava of Yaakov Avinu. It's very heavy. And the Einish was actually Lostam. Now the Ramban further darshans his Chiddush of, and why did they get this particular Einish? You do an Einish. As we all know, Hordus was killing everything that walked, every Talmud Chachamim. But then with Baba Ben Buta, the Gemara says a story that he said, this is not good, I'm killing too many people. And so he to try to appease the Jewish people, he built the Beis HaMikdash again. He renewed the Beis HaMikdash because through all of these 200 years of war, up to him, the Beis HaMikdash got very needed shiputz. So he did so well that ad kedekach that the Gemara says Mishalai Ra Binyan Hordus Ra Binyan Yafa Miyama. It was the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash was in the time of Hordus, which was a century or so before the Churban Beis HaMikdash. The Chachamim at the time who were very on the side of this whole story. Who were the Chachamim at the time? Antigonos Isocho, who were they? But it's unclear, nor is it clear what they say, because in the whole Gemara you have hardly anything about the Mishnah, nothing in the Gemara a little bit, about what the stance of the Chachamim was. But when Hordus rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, it's just a trick. You're going to knock down the Beis HaMikdash, and you're not going to build down it up until he builds the new one over. It was like that kind of a shiputz. Build the new one over, and from there, you can knock down once inside. Once we see the Beis HaMikdash, then you can start knocking down the Beis HaMikdash. By the way, and from those Divrei Chazal, we learned many Hilchos Beis HaKnesses that you're not supposed to knock down one until you build a new one. That's where we learn it from. So, but he originated as he was a Roman governor, but he originated as an Eved Leves Hashmonaim. During the Hashmonaim era and the Hashmonaim kings, he was their Eved, and then he killed them. He was Oilul L'Gdula, and he killed them. Says the Ramban further, V'afsher Gamkein, he says, now let me tell you another pshat. And this is the part that a lot of people don't know by heart. There's another pshat also. Afsher Gamkein, Shahaya Aleim Chet B'Malchusam Mipnei Shahaya Kohanim. First pshat is that they went against the tzava of Yaakov Avinu. The second pshat is, what did they do? Kohanim going involved with these kind of things. V'nitztavu, it says, right, in Bamidbar Yudches. In other words, this is not from a pasuk in Vayechi. This is rather from a pasuk in Bamidbar. Tishmeru es kunaschem l'chol dvar hamizbeach l'mibeis l'pareiches v'avadatem avodas matana etenes kunaschem. You have to be a Kohen. If you're a Kohen, do your job. So this is, by the way, a very important chiddush. I don't want to disappoint the Kohanim that are with us, but it's when Kohanim, like, you're not supposed to ask Kohanim to do something, l'chatzchila. Machlokes rishonim if it applies nowadays or not, but we're machmir not to ask Kohanim to, can you make me a cup of coffee, let's say. But the reason is not because we have kavod. It's not like kvod harav or kvod hanasi or something like that. It's because he has a different job. Meaning, if you're asking somebody who has one job to do a different job, you're taking away from the job that he should do. That's the pshat, and you're not allowed to ask a Kohen to do something, which is a very important distinction.
Wasn't Shas HaChak? I mean, the whole Judaism was a
Shas HaChak. He says they were tzaddikim and chasidim, but they still didn't have Eir. So,
if they had just stuck to doing what they did temporarily at the Shas HaChak, and then said, okay, we're done, now we're going back to Akuna and let base
maybe. We don't know that. That's speculation, but that's what Chaim said. Could be if they would have just won your war and go back to the Beis Medrash or Beis HaMikdash or wherever you're going, but you don't belong in like all of a sudden, and this is what happens always. You get involved in politics and in government, and it's all Hashem Shemayim, and then at the end of the day, you all become corrupt. Isn't that what happens?
Yeah, but something else you said here is not just long-term, short-term, it's also that the same act was two transgressions. One transgression is that no one else but Yehuda should be Melech, and number two, the Kohen should act like a Kohen. So if a different shape would be, I'd be like Yehuda.
Exactly. So he says it's nafkamina. Nafkamina bedavar is like this, between these two reasons. If the pshat is that you have to do it like the tzava of Yaakov Avinu, so then that means that nobody's allowed to be king ever except for Shevet Yehuda. If the pshat is that it's a pasnish for a kohen to do melucha and to do milchama, okay, but Shevet done, yes. Shevet Yisachar, yes, and all the different shvatim of Shivtei Yisrael can do it. So it's a big nafkamina. I have a suffix. If you look at the Ramban, you can form your own opinion whether the Ramban is saying that there's two reasons or he's saying either or. I'm not sure. Yeah.
If you come to the reason in Bamidbar, it would only be if they're in big Yehuda, like if they're involved.
So says the Rambam. But they were in Big Dekuna. I mean, I don't know. No, but I wonder if the Rambam means there that they have to actually be wearing big dekuna, but it means that, like we talk about people today in uniform. Doesn't mean that they're like soldiers in uniform. It doesn't mean he's in uniform. It doesn't mean he's wearing his uniform. It's a type of a status. So could be the Kesef Mishnah even explains that. I'm not right there in that Rambam, but could be the Kesef Mishnah explains that when we say the Kohanim have to have their begadim, it means to say that doesn't mean they're wearing their begadim while they're going to war, but it means they have begadim. It could be. But again, there's a suffix in the Ramban here, whether you learn that it's two things. When he says ve'efshir gamkein, I'm not such a bucky in the Ramban that I know how his Lashonis works, but efshir gamkein shayaleim chetum malchus neshahayu kohanim. I don't know if he means in addition. What do you think, Yechiel?
No, I'm wondering because the Rav said that it's melucha and the milchama. The Ramban is talking about the melucha.
The Melucha, yeah, exactly.
Milchama,
Right.
I'm not sure.
This is a kasha on the Ramban.
You asking Akasha?
No, I'm saying it is a kasha on the Ramban. He doesn't talk about the milchama.
No, because the milchama probably was pure nefesh.
Okay, so that becomes like these gentlemen are saying that milchama, you got to go out to do war. You got to go out to do war, but which is very, of course, nafkamina liyamenu. Because if the Rambam, the most yeshivish Rambam in the world, is the Rambam at the end of Shemitah V'Yovel. By the way, I think that's the only Rambam in Shemitah V'Yovel that people know. The Rambam says at the end of Shemitah V'Yovel that you don't have to be a Levi to be a Levi. Although anybody who wants to dedicate their life to Torah, you're a Levi. But there the Rambam says at the end of Shemitah V'Yovel that you're patur mi milchama. There he says milchama. Here he doesn't say milchama. Okay. V'risi b'Yerushalmi, says the Ramban. Call the Ramban. V'risi b'Yerushalmi. I saw in the Yerushalmi b'Masechta Huriyas, ein moishchin malachim kohanim. You're not allowed to do mashicha. Mashicha is when you pour oil on the head of a kohen. So you're not allowed to do ein moishchin malachim kohanim. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. If a kohen is the candidate for the melech, no. Even though a kohen gets his own mashicha. Kohen can get his own mashicha, but it's also only in the kavanah. Same act, I think. Same act, a kohen HaMashuach and a melech HaMashuach, same thing. But you can't be Moshe, like you can't say, like you're being toivel and you're saying, also I'm toivel for my tumah, and also I'm becoming a ger. Like, maybe there's such a thing, Tosfos says. But you can't have a kavanah of mashicha for melucha if you're a kohen. Amar Rabbi Yehuda antu roi al shem. The reason for this is says Yerushalmi lo yaser shevet mi Yehuda, because a kohen doesn't. So that's like what the Ramban's first pshat. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba laman yarich yamim al mamlachtahu manav kari Yisrael maxi basrei lo yahi kohanim alavim. Okay, hine. Let's see to finish the Ramban. Shanu b'kan. What we learned here is she'ein moishchem malachim in hakohanim b'nei Aaron. You don't do mashicha on kohanim for melucha. Upirosh tchila shu l'chvod Yehuda. And my first pshat is this is in honor of Yehuda. You don't disgrace Yehuda. That's his job. She'ein ashor sarim min hashevet hahu. Ulefichach al afal pi sheYisrael mekim aleim melech mishar shvatim k'fi tzarech hashal. Listen to this. Now he backtracks a little bit, but okay. Even though we find in Tanakh you find that there were other malachim that were not from Shevet Yehuda, lists of kings that were not from Shevet Yehuda, nevertheless, that was k'fi tzarech hasha. Like you have, I don't know if it's a comparison or not, but let's say, like a prime minister of Israel. Nobody's mocked, but he should be from Shevet Yehuda.
We should make it part of the election campaign.
Shevet Yehuda. So they'll say they're from Shevet Yehuda. It's to stop them. Ein moishchen oisan shelo yeh aleim hoid malchus. They should be like Shoftim v'Shoitrim Yehu, meaning the kings and that are not from Shevet Yehuda. They're like judges. They're like prime ministers. They're like ministers in the Knesset. Shoftim v'Shoitrim. V'yiskiru kohanim afal pi she'ein ba'atzmam royim l'mashicha. But kohanim is interesting because the kohanim do get mashicha. Ein moishchen oisam l'shem malchus v'chol shekein shar shvatim. And how much more so anybody else if you're not a kohen? So this is against the tzivoy. He's going back to his first shot against the tzava of Yaakov Avinu. He's explaining the Yerushalmi, that the second shot in the Yerushalmi is my second shot also, that no, it's not a problem of Yehuda or Yaakov Avinu, it's a problem with a kohen doing malachas. So here you have two possibilities based on the Yerushalmi in the Ramban with a huge nafka mina, because if it has to do with Savas Yehuda, so then that's every shevet, including Kohanim, are not allowed to serve as kings of Israel, which we know, of course, is not true. So he answers, well, they weren't really kings; they were shoftim v'shoitrim. Or you could say that it was a chasaron and kahuna. Like, how does a Kohen do such a thing? And if that's the issue, so then other shvatim can become. That's the Ramban. Ad kan divrei Ramban, parts of it are well quoted. Comes the Drashas Haran, which maybe you're not familiar with. The Drashas Haran brings the whole long Ramban. I wrote ... Al derech hazah Amar HaRamban, Elu Dvarav, v'divrei teimahem. He says the Ramban is a tema, it's a pella, a wunder. Sheim Kain, what are you saying? By the way, the Ran, I don't like to compare Rishonim and their abilities. That's not for us to do. They were giants, but it's interesting. The Ran was a philosopher. The Drashas Haran is like, he philosophizes about things. It was a little bit of a different derech than let's say the Rashba or the Ramban. It was a little bit different. But he says, Divrei Teimahem, Sheim Kain, because if you're going to say that they were violating the tzava of Yaakov Avinu, Lo'nishlam ha'avtachas, Yaakov Bazeh. Say differently already that you see Yaakov Avinu had a nevuah and it didn't come true. Like, whoa. In other words, you're worried about the covenant of Yaakov Avinu. What you're saying is that Yaakov Avinu, whatever he said, lav dafka. So you're being mezalzel Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is saying, if you take, let's make pretend it has a hey for a second. Asher yikra eschem ba'achar zayamim. This is what's going to happen, and it didn't happen yet. But according to the Ramban, it didn't happen. They were able to go against the tzava of Yaakov Avinu and be matzliach. Of course. That's why I was maktim my aleph and my hey. V'zeh pasuk. So comes the Ran. He concludes that this pasuk of Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda einoi mitzvah. You're learning wrong shot. It is not a mitzvah v'lo yazhara. It is not a mitzvah saseh. It's not a mitzvah lo saseh. L'bayim. Aval hakdamas hayediyah mimasha yikra. With a hey. It's just a hakdama to what's going to happen, like an insight into the future. That's all it is. V'im molchem b'Yisrael ovrim al zeh. And if we see in history that this is not what's happening, like it's not Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda, no, that's not what's happening. It's not what's happening now, right? So if you see it's not happening, so the answer is that this haftacha that Yaakov Avinu was talking about was only during the time of David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech. After that, it didn't apply, says the Ran.
What about the second answer?
1 second. Ve'ein mimalchei Hashmonaim al kushya klal. This is the point. That don't ask me a question from the Hashmonaim. Didn't do anything wrong. Why? Ki lo yavtichu ha'kosav leYehuda. This that Yaakov Avinu was talking about Yehuda, promising to Yehuda, Kol Yemei Hayos HaMemshala Yisrael Mitzad Atzmam. Listen carefully to these words. That's talking about when the Memshala Yisrael was Mitzad Atzmam. Who wants to translate that for me? Independent. I know Mitzad Atzmam means in itself, but independent that means, right? In other words, they're a real government. Loi tichras, and when that happens, loi tichras mishevet Yehuda. When that happens, you'll have Yehuda back. Mashiach, David HaMelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. V'hamemshalom lo'olam tia b'shivtei kol zman shetia b'Yisrael. There's no promise in Yaakov Avinu's words. It doesn't mean you can't be the president of the shul or even the prime minister of Israel if you're not from Yehuda. What Yaakov Avinu was talking about is ad ki ava shilai. That we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash. We're talking about in the time of the Mashiach, or backwards we're talking in the time of David and Shlomo. But the whole thing in between, it's not a. These words are amazing. It's not a. Like Memshala Yisrael Mitzad Atzmam. Now look at this, in case you think I'm pushing it. V'hamalach, the bold is mine. V'hamalachim, and the kings Asher Malchu b'Bayis Sheni Laihaisa Malchusa Mitzad Atzmam Klal. They weren't real kings. This is different. like the whole Ramban Heipsach Nishdan.
First generation of Hashmonaim.
Even the first ones, they fought a war. Pikuach Nefesh. But loyhayu malchusa mitzarason klal avol heim kipekidim lemelech paras v'romi gam luzulasa min amlachim. They were client kings, governors, taking care of things, like the United States. So well, first of all, before we get to America, what's the story with Paras? How'd they get into the story? So the answer is, simple history tells us that the Persians were the ones that allowed for the Bayis Sheni, and the Persians were the ones that allowed the Jews to come in, and the Persians were the victorious people in this country. This was part of the Persian Empire until Alexander the Great came, who was a Greek, and he fought with them. And it could be that there was a Greek occupation. Eventually, it was a Greek occupation until the time of the Hashmonaim. And now the I don't know the history, but the Hashmonaim were in a sense fighting for the Persians, and it went back to Persian rule in that sense. In other words, that's what he says. Lamelech Paras Veromi. What do we want from the Romans? Because one of the most important footnotes in history is that it was at that time that the Malchus Hashmonai brought in the Roman Empire to help them out running Israel. So that was stupid. But these were our, they had a lot of money. America, it was civilization with a lot of money and a lot of know-how and a lot of government structure. The Greeks and the Romans had this. The Romans got it from the Greeks. So what the Rana is saying, if you're talking about the atzmius, if you will, of Eretz Yisrael, go back to the Persians. If you talk about the future of Eretz Yisrael, go to the Romans. But these guys, Hashmonaim, who were tzaddikim and zeidim b'yad oiskei seresecha, but they were just pekidim. Never was there a havamina, in any case, that nobody's allowed to be in charge. There will always be a Yehuda around. That's how the Ran learns Pshat. When there will be a Melucha, the whole time that we're in Galus, Ein Melech, Ein Sar, the Abarbanel is Myrich on this. Abarbanel asks that when he was in Italy, was there an Indian that the leaders of the community should be from Shevet Yehuda? Don't forget, they still knew who was from Shevet Yehuda, because like the way it works nowadays is that anybody who's miyachis themselves could be miyachis yourself to the Maral MiPrague, let's say. He's one of the 7. If you could be miyachis yourself to the Maral MiPrague has a shtar yichus to Rashi, and Rashi says a shtar yichus to David HaMelech. So yesh. Babich Rebbe, by the way, was a candidate for Mashiach because he was Malchus Beis David. He came from Shevet Yehuda.
On a patrilineal line, or does it include mothers as well?
Right. Yeah.
Because by this stage, everyone's descended from everyone. And
You're descended from the Maral. No, Sephardim are not descendants from the Maral, but maybe to some extent. But at one point it was absolutely clear. So what you have here is a huge yesodistic machlokes between the Ramban and the Ran. Nachon? It's a serious machlokes. Whether the Malchei Beis Hashmonaim were actually kings, or were they pekidim? It's maskir, what everybody knows from Rabbi Yaacov Kamenetsky, where he was talking about something different a little bit, but the same yisoid, that the whole Bayis Sheni, you see it, there are differences, the Gemara says differences in the Bayis Sheni and the Bayis Rishon. So, like one of the differences that Bayis Rishon, Hayesh Shechina, Bayis Sheni, there was no Shechina. Okay, isn't that the whole point of the Beis HaMikdash? So, it should be a Shechina. What else are we doing with the Beis HaMikdash if there's no Shechina? And that lack of Shechina, the Gemara says, was garim all kinds of halachas. The Pashtus is there was no Ner Maravi that was burning all the time. That nest wasn't there. All kinds of halachas that didn't take place. So Ad Kedei Kach, Rabbi Yaacov Kamenetsky said that they tried, but it never really became a real Beis HaMikdash. So the Bayis Shlishi will actually be the Bayis Sheni, and he has many articles and essays that he writes in Torah and Rambam and Halacha on this very, very important yesod, which in my opinion is an irrefutable yesod, although we don't think of it that way. I think Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, like Kehillat the Bayis Sheni was good, a central organization, and he's saying the same thing, that the whole Bayis Sheni and the whole Hashmonaim, just extending it. The Ran is extending that even further and saying that the whole Malchus Beis Hashmonaim was not a real Malchus Beis Hashmonaim, and the Lashon is, and this is something we have to think about all the time, if they Memshala LiYisrael mitzad atzmam, and this was not mitzad atzmam. So Mamela, to do Chazar, according to the Ran, if it's not Mitzad Asmam, there's no issue at all of violating the tzava of Yaakov Avinu. Another machlokes between the Ramban and the Ran, let's just, there's another machlokes going on here at the same time, and that is whether Yaakov Avinu's words, La Yasser Shevet Yehuda, was that some kind of a mitzvah or was that just a prediction? So the Ramban says, it's a mitzvah, chiyuv, chayiv l'chaimas divrei hameis. Nobody has the right to get up and go against Yaakov Avinu and become a king. La Yasser Shevet Yehuda, he looks at as a lav. Comes the Ran, this is the second machlokes that's going on over here. Says the Ran that's La Yasser Shevet Yehuda is not a mitzvah, it's not a lav, it was a thing that Yaakov Avinu said. Further on in the Drashas Haran, this is in Drashas, say about this, that Yaakov Avinu was kodim out in Torah, and therefore we were allowed to go against him. You're not going against him. You're not going against him. So let me say, Shaul was before. So Shaul was before, but since David HaMelech, so and of course the biggest machlokes between the Ramban and the Ran is whether all of the Malchei Yisrael, going through all the generations, not Malchei Yehuda, but Malchei Yisrael, we're doing something wrong. The Ran says, no, not doing anything wrong. It's not any worse than being the president of the shul. It's not a real minui. It's not a real thing. So in terms of like the ultimate power. So let me end with just sharing with you a little bit. I have to just make a hard stop here. Ubecholza is the brisker of in Parshas Shoftim, and this brisker of, I have it here in Parshas Shoftim, but the brisker of says this in many places, and it's originally a yesod that came from his father Reb Chaim Brisker, and I just want to, I would have liked to read the whole thing with you, but I'm just going to tell you his yesod. The pasuk says, "Soim tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Hashem." Asher Yivchar Hashem. What does Asher Yivchar Hashem mean, Yechiel? That what? That Shem chooses. How? But through a Navi. Through a Navi. So you have to have a Navi. So the brisker of is omed on the fact comes up a lot of places, that there seems to be a difference between the halachas of Malchus Beis David and the other Malchei Yisrael. Not to say they're not malachim, because the Rambam says, look at that first Rambam that I have on the sheet over here. He says, V'gavru b'nei Hashmonaim ha'kohanim ha'gdolim v'chazra Malchus liYisrael Yisrael Masayim Shana. He calls it Malchus Yisrael. So the Brisker Rav wants to know, why is it that there are certain halachas that have to be for Malchus Beis David and not for others? And a simple example, that Ein Yeshiva Ba'azara Ela L'Malchus Beis David Levad. The Rambam says that nobody's allowed to sit down in the Azara unless you're a melech. But not just any melech, it has to be a melech from Beis David. So why? A melech is a melech. If the idea is a melech pair together, so why can't the melech sit down in the So he explains, and there's a whole bunch of other halachas here. You don't do Mashiach. Seems a little bit different than Ramban, but you don't do Mashiach on a melech unless it's Malchus Beis David. Did you know that? It's a Mevorsh Rambam. That Mashiach, the Melech HaMashiach, or Melech HaMashiach, as we call it. So the Melech HaMashiach has to be a Melech from Beis David, which is why Mashiach has to be Malchus Beis David Nivchara K'dechsiv B'kama Mekaymes B'kra. And he gives the following example, and with this I will end. He says that when a Bechira, there's a difference between a Bechira and a Minui. Here's the Brisker Vart. There's a difference between a Bechira and a Minui, an appointment and a choice. When it comes to choices in the Lashon of Gemara, and even in the Lashon of the Torah, he says, a choice means to the exclusion of all else. A minui, you can be mamana 10 people. So it means like this. He gives an example from Chazal. Chazal say that Ad shalei nivchara Yerushalayim, haisakol Eretz Yisrael ksheira lemizbeachos. You can build a mizbeach anywhere in Eretz Yisrael, but once Yerushalayim was chosen, that's it. Only Yerushalayim. Mishenivchar Yerushalayim, yatzas Eretz Yisrael, shenemar shamer lecha, kim b'makam asher yivchar. Kishiyivchar Beis Olamim, when the place of the Beis Hamikdash was chosen out, Haisa Yerushalayim, Yatzas Yerushalayim, that excluded Yerushalayim. So it used to be, there was a time in history that you could bring karbanos all over Eretz Yisrael, and then it switched to only in Yerushalayim, then it switched to only in the Malkat HaMikdash. Why? Because every time there was a Bechira, it was La'afuke, all the different places before. Ki Bachar Hashem B'tzion. Same thing was Aaron HaKohen. Ad shalei nivchar Aaron, how you call Yisrael ksherim lekahuna. A Bechar could be a Kohen, right? But once Misha nivchar Aaron, Yatsu call Yisrael. Ad shalei nivchar David, how you call Yisrael ksherim lemalchus, Chazal say, until David was appointed or chosen, right? Hashem chose him. So then, how you call Yisrael ksherim lemalchus, Misha nivchar David, Yatsu call Yisrael. Hare the Medama Bechiras Malchus Beis David LeBechiras Kahuna v'Yerushalayim Beis Elamim. Da'idei Bechira Yatzu Kol Yisrael v'Nifsalu L'Melucha. So I can't give respect to the Brisker Rav in 1 second, but let's just understand the Nakuda. He's saying that you could have this kind of a melech and you could have that kind of a melech. You could have this type of a leader and you could have that kind of a leader. But it's not once it's a Malchus Beis David, once there's a Bechira Malchus Beis David, then it's only Malchus Beis David. And the other ones, what about all the other Malachim and Klal Yisrael? Like the Ran says, they're not real. They're not real. And it's very interesting that even though the Rambam says Chazra Malchus Yisrael, but it's called all over Malchus Beis Hashmonaim. It's like a new kind of Malchus. Not Malchus Yisrael, not Malchus Beis David. It's Malchus Beis Hashmonaim. It was a new type of a Malchus. And in summation, we'll have to stop here, but in summation, what it comes out is that according to the Ramban, it seems this was a real Malchus. According to the Ramban, It was a client government. It wasn't the Ran rather. It wasn't a real malchus. The Rambam, you could read two ways, but the Rambam does say Chazra HaMalchus LiYisrael. But did he mean a malchus of Bechira or did he mean a malchus of Minui? Unclear in the Rambam. It's not clear. But one thing's for sure: he wasn't against Chanukah. He writes about Chanukah that we celebrated because the tzaddikim were goiver over and we created a malchus for 200 years. So on some level it was a malchus, even though the Ran says it wasn't a real malchus. And the Brisker Rava teaches us this kind of malchus and that kind of malchus. But once there's a malchus based David, which will be b'mheira v'yameinu, the malchus based David will be choser le'mamadam. So then nobody's allowed to be a melech anymore. There's only one melech, and that's the one who's mashuach. And that's the one who can say, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, this is me. And Eliyahu Navi, you need a Navi for this, so Eliyahu Navi is going to come and tap him on the shoulder and say, you're the man.